But it seems to work out as long as you speak up. Particularly some of us older folks that even with hearing aids, doesn't do it well. So I'm from BW Greenway, and most of you know about us. Our brochure and map, which follows our map here, is over on, if you haven't signed in, they're over on the table there. And we've been around for about 26 years. We've got about 26 properties that we've got conservation easements on. Gonna get another one, actually with Carol's property this year, And we just had a meeting today with the Clean Ohio Fund for a $150,000 grant for the Garland wetland with trails and walks and things like that. So we've got about $6.5 million from the Clean Ohio Fund over the years. And we're part of a greater data and hopefully doing something about the sprawl that we encounter in our Miami Valley. With regard to the BW Greenway, we have two watersheds. And you folks probably can't see that such, but we got the Great Miami Watershed. It starts up, the Headwater Creek actually is probably the eastern part of it that feeds into the Mad River. And we have Mud Run, and we have Muddy Creek and Don's Creek. So we got a lot of headwater streams in our greenway, but we also, in the little Miami watershed, we have the Beaver Creek, Ludlow Creek, and probably one or two I'm forgetting. But the interesting thing happened to me today. I was with the NRAC people doing the grant application on Garland Wetland, which is just off of Commerce Boulevard. And I thought Beaver Creek went through it. Well, I found out today, Beaver Creek's a little bit to the north, comes under Garland and goes into Garland Wetland west, but what's in Garland Wetland east is a tributary. And so it's a headwater stream, and it was kind of interesting, that we are actually going to be talking about headwater streams. And of course, some of you can some definitions. We have lost a wetland in the last couple of months over off of 675 and 235. We're trying to figure out what we can do so that never happens again. And I also was on a drive around of the Barrett gravel pits off of Haddix Road, right next to next to I-70, and they Smith's Ditch, which is where it comes right out of the tribe farm there. They ended up digging it up and having it part of their big gravel pit. So we lost some headwater stream habitat and so forth with that. So that's another issue that we're not the only one that's going to face those kind of issues. I did pass out a survey of our next Chautauqua. This is our 22nd, so it's part of our education team. And if you haven't signed in, please do. Actually, I'll introduce Tom Allen as our moderator, and then if the rest of you can introduce yourselves. Hold on, sit down.
All right. Well, I'm Tom Allen, and I'm the Trout Unlimited State Council Conservation Chair, and I'm also Conservation Chair with the Mad River chapter of Trout Unlimited, and I'm on the board of the Ohio Scenic River Association also. My past life, I worked at Ohio EPA. I was Assistant Chief of the Division of Drinking and Groundwater, and I oversaw the groundwater program. And that's something, the topics I got from Bob doesn't include groundwater, but you can bet you're going to hear some groundwater talk tonight, and how important it is to not only our public drinking water and private well drinking water, but also for surface water quality. So with that,
Well, welcome tonight. My name is Amanda McKay. I'm the District Director of the Green Soil and Water Conservation District. And tonight I have with me one of my technicians. This is my rural technician, Warren McCarran.
Hi. I'm Mike Eckberg. I am a hydrogeologist with the Miami Conservancy District in Dayton, Ohio. You probably know us mostly as, for our flood protection role. But we're also really interested in, conservation having healthy headwater areas, because it makes our job of protecting folks from flooding along the Great Miami River, makes our system that much better if the headwaters areas are doing what they're doing and retaining water and letting some of it absorb and become groundwater. So what my team does at Miami Conservancy District is we operate in partnership with USGS. We run 24 stream gauges on streams that drain into or in the Great Miami River itself. We monitor rainfall, we monitor the level of groundwater and aquifers and streams, and we do some studies on water quality.
Hi, my name is Sarah Walentine, and I am on the board of trustees for BW Greenway. And I also have, so with BW Greenway, I've been with them for about 3 years and working primarily in land conservation projects and managing the funds that we're able to secure to help us get conservation easements as well as privately donated conservation easements. So that's one of the major roles I play in my role as a board member with BW Greenway. I newly graduated from Ohio State with a master's in environmental engineering. I studied anything that had to do with water, from stream geomorphology to wetland ecology and restoration, to ecological engineering and hydrogeology. So I'm really passionate about water, and I just started a job 2 weeks ago for a small consulting firm doing stream restoration work. So I'm happy to be here tonight, and thank you all for coming.
My name is Grace Deach. I'm the Director of Conservation at Five Rivers Metro Parks. I've got a lot of different areas that I manage at Five Rivers. I do a lot of different types of restoration and wildlife management and research, but from a headwater stream and water quality perspective, I've managed the Great Miami Mitigation Bank. I've been a mitigation banker for, probably about 10 years. And then, so a lot of our parks are kind of surrounded by development, subdivisions, and that's only expanding and growing. And so now a lot of our work is focused on how we can make our parks more resilient, because we are the receivers of all of that stormwater, and it's really causing some issues within our parks. And so we do a lot of kind of off-channel, wetland work or preventing erosion and things like that, so that we can help further protect that water quality downstream.
Good evening. I'm Anna Komnev. I am the 401 Wetlands Manager at Ohio EPA. So I oversee the state's regulatory program with regards to fill in stream and wetlands, as well as the mitigation aspect as well. I also sit on the interagency review team, which is composed of several different agencies and led by the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers. We kind of co-lead it in a sense that anything that comes from approval under the interagency review team, which is regulations of mitigation banking sites or in-lieu fee programs, is used through our mitigation program at Ohio EPA for offsetting those impacts. I have a background in wetland and stream ecology, was a former consultant doing wetland and stream delineations and permitting, so I kind of flipped the table when I came to Ohio EPA to do the regulatory side of things. And then before that, I was with Grace at Five Rivers.
All right. My understanding of this format, we're going to go through some topics here that you can ask questions. And if it's all right with Bob, if you have a particular opinion about something or a technical point that you want to make, feel free to, this is a discussion. It's not just to present to you, but to also see the things that you understand or don't understand, we can discuss those things. I wanted to make a couple points too. In my job with Ohio EPA, and this is true with a lot of folks at Ohio EPA, we never got past the point of reaction. When the Clean Water Act happened, the Safe Drinking Water Act happened, dealing with wetlands, 401, 404, whatever, most of the time we're reacting to something that's already happened, impacts and issues created. One of the things that we did back in the 80s, we put together a strategic plan for dealing with groundwater, because groundwater, even believe it or not, in the 1980s under Ohio law, it was mysterious and occult. But with technology and so on, we started understanding what it is, how it moves, and how important it is, not just, and especially in this area for drinking water, but it's also important, for surface water. And one of the things in that strategic plan was to deal with the issues up front, use your science and technology to protect it, prevent the issues. Because we know what happened with solid waste sites and hazardous waste sites, tanks, buried tanks, gas stations, etc., is that they created issues and they were very difficult to take care of. So prevention, and that's one thing, and one way of doing that is sustainable growth principles, which under those principles, you protect your water resources. You understand the science of what's happening with your groundwater and surface water to prevent those issues, whether it's agriculture, development, mineral mining, whatever it may be. Understand if that happens, if that land use practice happens, will it impact your water, groundwater and surface water? So the first topic here is bank stabilization. And I can tell you from the work that we've been doing on Mad River, especially in the last 5 to 6 years, you're getting, first of all, you're getting rain events that are so much different. I think it was 2016, within a 4-month period, we had 4 floods on Mad River. It should have been running at the Urbana USGS gauge about 200 cubic feet per second. During those 4 floods in 3 to 4 months, it went 4,000 to 6,000. We're sending that water so fast into those river systems that they're spiking. And when they spike, they're shearing off the banks. And there's a lot of reasons for that too, lack of riparian area and so on. So coming back and stabilizing like in Mad River, 80–90% of the silt that's in the bottom of that river is from its banks. So how, are there different practices and so on to stabilize those banks? And the other point I wanted to make too is in these topics, you start seeing the connection between them. Bank stabilization, buffer areas, wetlands, and so on. So,
Tom,
yeah.
can I divert you a little bit? Because I'm not as educated as you are about this.
Well,
May I ask the panel or you to define what a headwater stream is? Because that's the topic of the night. and how that differs from, say, the Mad River? Is the Mad River a headwater stream, and if it's not, why not? And what are perhaps a general overview of what are the concerns of a headwater stream that are specific to it as opposed to, say, the Mad River?
So I threw out that term earlier, headwater stream, and I'm sorry, I didn't define it. So what Ohio EPA will say, if you look at some of their documents, is technically a headwater stream is a stream that drains an area of 20 square miles or less. So it's a relatively small area. When we can further break that down into kind of primary headwater streams, where we're talking about streams that drain an area of a mile, 1 square mile or less. And they're kind of defined as, it's got a well-defined channel, okay? And there's kind of 3 classes of them. The first class, may only be flow in it. It's what we call an ephemeral stream. There's only flow in it after it rains or the snow melts, okay? Other times of the year, it's dry. Then we get into class 2, where there's water flowing in it for parts of the year. But at other times of the year, there may not be flow at all. And the pool in the channels during, dry times, base times, is never more than 40 centimeters, okay? Has a well-defined channel, may have some aquatic life in it, aquatic, fish and bugs, okay? And then we get into higher classes, class 3, where we're looking at, we've got some maybe groundwater that's kind of providing, more sustained flow. And the water temperatures are colder. It may support cold water. They support cold water kind of small fish and macroinvertebrates, and again, well-defined channel. So we're talking about small streams, drain small areas. Why are they important? Well, they provide a lot of important ecological as well as kind of practical services. For one, they can hold and retain water in them, so they reduce the amount of flow, if they're healthy and in good shape going downstream. They remove sediment. They can absorb and hold nitrogen and phosphorus, which we often don't want flowing downstream because it pollutes downstream lakes and rivers and things like that. And they provide habitat for fish and bugs. They provide greenways, and they reduce flooding downstream. So in a nutshell, that's kind of what we're talking about when we're talking about headwater streams.
And on a broader sense, let's just look at Mad River. Mad River is a tributary to the Great Miami River system. But if you look at topo map, you'll see basically the Mad River, the whole Mad River watershed, and it's really controlled by gradient. In this area, a lot of it's because of the way the glaciers came and they basically set up where all this water here is going to come in to the Mad River. The upper part of Mad River, up around Bell Fountain, like Mike was talking about, there's some of those streams, those little tributaries and so on, they come off of the Bell Fountain bedrock, so they're overland flow. Some of them are in the Outwash Valley, but they feed these tributaries. Some of them are even associated, and it used to be a lot of them, before some of them are diverted, started as wetlands and fins and springs out of fractured bedrock that feeds the upper part of that Mad River. And then you have the main stem coming into the Great Miami.
May I ask a follow-up then and ask about these small headwater streams that you were talking about? they're so small, if, say, there is a housing development that's building near a headwater stream, we have state and county representatives here. Who governs whether the impact on that? Who monitors that and says to the developer what your plans are okay or what your plans are not? Is that county or is that state? Is it EPA? Is
You wanna-
all
Yeah.
that?
That's regulated at the state level. I mean, counties certainly can develop their own regulations as well, but it is regulated statewide at Ohio EPA under the
So even
program.
these very small streams?
It depends. I mean, right now, we do not regulate impacts to ephemeral streams. So it's a little unfortunate, right? At the federal level, there are waters called waters of the US that they regulate. And those are generally waters that drain into like our larger rivers and streams that carry commerce. Waters of the US definitions are constantly changing. I mean, I've been working for the agency for 6 years. They've changed probably 3 times. They're looking at changing it again. It seems like with each new administration, they change it again, based on, the priorities of that administration. And right now, ephemeral streams are not regulated at the federal level. It kind of started during Trump's last term, when he tried to pass a new definition of water of the US, and they tried to deregulate streams then. Ohio tried to take them under their umbrella and regulate them. We got a huge appeal out of it. Somebody appealed it, basically saying that we shouldn't be regulating them. And so now we actually can only regulate ephemeral streams if they are regulated at the federal level. We still are regulating intermittent streams. So intermittent streams are also considered part of that headwater system, as well as some small perennial streams. For now, we're regulating intermittent streams, but there is this big push right now for deregulation of intermittent streams as a water of the US as well. And so with that could also change the state regulations. Hopefully not, they're still considered a water of the state, even if they're not a water of the US. But it really depends on the flow regime of the stream. If the Corps of Engineers is taking regulation on them, then we might have a hand on that regulation. And it depends on the impact size. The Corps of Engineers will authorize impacts to these streams if they're under a certain threshold amount, under a general permit, and we won't see those if we've certified it. So it gets a little complicated, but ultimately, Ohio EPA is the regulatory authority over impacts to your streams and wetlands.
So then on a county level, if said subdivision is being built in what has been designated as an urbanized area by Ohio EPA, that would then fall under our county's NPDES Phase 2 stormwater permit. And that is regulated by the Greene County engineer. She is our stormwater engineer for Greene County. And then our department at Soil and Water helps support that program. My urban technician, he goes out and works in conjunction with the engineer and her other technicians to observe and try to make sure that the subdivisions are following those permit requirements, which are also regulated under Ohio EPA.
Yeah.
I think the county commissioner or county engineer also has authority under the drainage laws. Somebody wants to change something on their piece of property and basically drain water into one of these tributaries, or even a main stem of a river, they have to abide by the drainage laws. They have to get permit approval for doing that construction, for draining that piece of property.
There are some examples across the country and even in Ohio where some regulation of the stream can happen at a local or at a municipal or township level. And that is if they enact like a riparian setback ordinance So you could have, like a zoning authority, could pass, as an overlay zoning kind of, regulation and say that, for streams in our jurisdiction, we're gonna require that there's, a setback of a certain distance from the bank of the stream, and, that area is going to be maintained in its natural state. I just bring that out to say there are instances if a township or a county enacts a setback ordinance, that that's one means of regulating it at a more local level.
Mike, I'm actually on the Clark County Rural Zoning Commission, and I think I would be open to review the setbacks. So technically, what would be a good number? In other words, a riparian corridor, on a headwater stream, I know we got salamanders 200 feet, but they wouldn't go with that, so is there any recommendation that?
The ordinances that I've looked at and reviewed vary from place to place, and there's good reasons sometimes for different ways that they do. I've seen some that, if it's a little bit larger stream, they may enact, generally the minimum I see is kind of 50 feet. But then they may say, if that doesn't extend all the way to the 100-year floodplain for that stream, we'll incorporate that. Or if there's a wetland adjacent to the stream, that wetland has to be incorporated into the setback. So, Little Miami, I think, uses for when properties that they have conservation easements. I think on the Big River, you're using we've got a 300-foot setback, I think, is kind of the desired for a river of that size. The way I've seen them, they vary a bit by the drainage area of the stream. Sometimes they're sized to that. Sometimes they're sized to, just say there's a lot of different ways to do it. And it's beyond what we could talk about here tonight.
Well, I guess reading is, if you put something in a zoning regulation, they like yes or no, or, and very whereas maybe the answer would be Soil and Water would make a recommendation, and then when it's doing the subdivision planning or whatever, rather than necessarily, a minimum, 50 feet, but other things beyond that, I don't know, Amanda, if you get involved in any of those.
So Soil and Water is a non-regulatory organization. We do not regulate or enforce or make anybody do anything. We do give advice based on situations. And when you're getting into overall zoning regulations like that, we look at situations based on individual situations in the watersheds. So making a blanket statement would not be a good idea for us.
Right.
The Chagrin River Partnership has model ordinances available online that any folks can take a look at, and you can see the rationale behind that. There's also some documents that have been put out there that I can point people towards that lay out different methodologies for deciding what they might want to use in their area.
This is something we're actually exploring a little bit of at Ohio EPA. I'm working with the stormwater program. Now, I know enough about the stormwater program to be a little bit dangerous, but not probably all that would be beneficial to this group. But we are looking at the effects of the amount of impervious pavement within a watershed, and at what point will that affect the water quality within that watershed? And then, potential things that we can do to try to get ahead of it and prevent, that, be more proactive, if you will. And looking through several studies and some of our own data, we found like 50 feet is a good starting point. Because we have to think also what the stakeholders how they'll react, not being able to build up to 100 feet or whatever within the buffer zones. But the Darby, I think, has their own set of certain protections. Anybody that builds within that watershed, they have to have some setback requirements, and if they do not abide by those setback requirements, they have to do some sort of mitigation for that.
I think the other thing you need to keep in mind when you start talking about blanket widths and setbacks is what is the quality of the buffer you're creating? Ohio is full of invasive species. I mean, honeysuckle, autumn olive, tree of heaven, you name it, it's out there. So you could have all these really nice buffers and setbacks that are just absolute garbage for anything.
Right.
Bought a farm, 40 acres of woods that, I don't know if a rabbit could get through it. When I started removing honeysuckle, was that a great woods? No, it was garbage. And that was the buffer along Jonah's Run that feeds into Caesars Creek Lake. There was zero quality of anything in that. So when you start to regulate and zone minimum widths of things, I think you have to go into it with a plan of how are you going to maintain it. Do you want native grasses? Do you want a deciduous forest? Who's going to maintain and keep out the invasives? Who's going to keep the stand going? Well, you're going to have deer population that's going to destroy it. So to make those blanket statements, you should go into that with your eyes wide open of a way to maintain that establishment. Just my 2 cents. You can take it and throw it in a jar when you get home.
Why is it that you say that invasives make it a zero quality?
Let's use honeysuckle, for example.
How's that affect us?
Okay, you could have 4 honeysuckle plants in this room, and when you look down on it, you think, oh, it's great cover. Well, realistically, there's 4 massive root systems that are shallow rooted. There's nothing growing underneath them. There's zero nutritional value in the seeds. The seeds just spread more honeysuckle through the birds. They're not great nesting habitat because it's such a low bush. Predators can come in and get the nesting birds. It's zero diversity in that forested area. They will go in and choke out anything you want. I clean back 60 to 80 feet around every field on my farm when I bought the farm. I did not take out one sapling bigger than that. It was 100% honeysuckle. It just crept in. It was garbage habitat, in my opinion.
No, it is.
Nothing was growing underneath it. Gullies as deep as your head going down into the woods where honeysuckle was, because nothing would grow that was stable. The root system's terrible. It's shallow. It's I can't say enough bad about it.
But is a honeysuckle buffer better for the stream than no buffer?
Not in my
No.
opinion.
I would say so. I would disagree.
I disagree as
I
well.
disagree. I would never advocate for honeysuckle. Let me just put that straight, okay? But when it comes to stream quality, water quality, it's a vegetation, and vegetation picks up water, helps to the roots, although somewhat shallow, helps to stabilize the bank better than something that's not there, if something was built right up to the stream. Maybe something like some tall prairie grasses could provide better root systems than honeysuckle, but anything that is a natural buffer compared to just building right up to the stream, I think is an improvement to water quality.
That's an extreme example there. But as you're talking about the Mad River, the last 3 or 4 years, we've probably removed 2 or 3 acres of honeysuckle. As talked about, nothing grows under it. If I took you to these places, even 10 years ago, this honeysuckle wouldn't be there, and you would be seeing native plants going through a succession of different flowering plants and so on. They're all gone. If that honeysuckle is there. The other problem is like nothing will grow, nothing's holding that soil, and we started talking about stabilizing banks, the water's moving in so fast, it's spiking. And now in the shearing off the banks and so on, we've never really, in an outwash valley, you shouldn't see overland erosion problems. It should be penetrating the soil and it moves slowly to the river. Well, we're moving that water so fast now, you get that spikiness, it's taking off the banks. But we never really, most of the silt and stuff in Mad River is from its banks. We haven't really seen any overland erosion. But on some of the steeper banks now that have honeysuckle, nothing growing, you're starting, and especially in a heavy downpour, you're starting to get overland erosion down that slope. And we've never seen that before, so it's just adding more and more to the issue. But as she was pointing out, that's still a lot better than bringing,
Grass, turf grass.
whatever,
Yeah.
you're right up at the stream bank. And that's why I can take you in different parts of Mad River. Some of the landowners, I would say, they have set aside maybe up to 100 feet on each side, and they have mature trees. And those root systems, plus they don't have it, when they've got thick growth of that honeysuckle will only grow on the outside of it. It can't get enough light in that forest. And that root system, we're not seeing the shearing of the banks because those root systems and so on are holding that there. And it would be, if we can get other native plants and stuff in there, it makes it even better.
What about English ivy and vinca?
Well, they're not native and they take off, they will, I don't know how everybody else feels, they will hold the soil, but they're not a native plant. I don't know when you've got English. The other thing about those ivies, they tend to start growing up the trees and they'll kill them. It's just like, the wild grapevine and things like that is also a huge issue. Whenever we're clearing out honeysuckle, we usually have to deal with grapevine too, because it'll eventually kill the tree. So I would not, promote those things as a ground cover unless there's some way that you control it.
Does winter creeper have the same effect?
I think to some degree, I haven't seen it, out there, but, I don't know.
I think anytime you play with fire of introducing something that is a non-native
Yeah.
into an environment, I think that's where we as humans really screw up. We try to fix things with things that we see in other countries, other regions, other areas. There's a reason it's not here or was never here. If it doesn't have a natural competition, it's not a tree, but pythons in the Everglades,
Yeah.
they have no natural predators and they've essentially ruined a whole ecosystem down there. But I think we have to just keep in mind that whatever you do, you need to rely back to native species.
Well, I know all that.
Yeah.
That's been my, my focus for 40 years. But I'm asking because I live in Oakwood, and there's the Rubicon Creek. Mike, I guess you're familiar with that. And so we have the problems along that bike path there is the Japanese knotweed, and then a lot of the houses that are upland, it's the ivies.
Yeah.
And so when we manage it, there's the honeysuckle, there's all this stuff to manage. And so I'm wondering, how does the average person walk up and down that bike path and think, what should be addressed first? And that's why I asked about the ivies.
And for landowners, homeowners, I'm gonna preface what I'm about ready to say with, in a normal time, when the federal government is open, and another normal time when we have a functioning farm bill. Some of these things are services that the Soil and Water District can help homeowners with. One of the things Warren works very closely with the Natural Resources Conservation Service with some of those farm bill programs that allows us to help landowners. If you've got a farm that butts up next to a stream and you're interested in putting in stream buffers or setbacks there, or putting in wildlife habitat, or if you own a woods and you have a lot of these invasives in your woods and you want to do honeysuckle removal, those are types of things that we can help out with in a normal situation. You want to talk a little bit about some of those programs?
There's, like she was saying, there's,
We also work
You
with
know,
Pheasants Forever too,
timber stand
with some of that
improvement.
wildlife habitat.
With the invasive species removal, I will say it is not necessarily for residential. In some of the small areas, borderline, USDA looks at it as landscaping. So, you know, I have been involved in several 5-6 acre contracts. And then with filter strips and stuff, a lot of that, it is voluntary back to people that want to do it. You know, I think USDA will cost share up to 120 feet wide of, if it is a crop field or crop history, to reestablish some of those buffers.
Tom, and, the issue of mineral extraction and the situation that happened in our greenway, where the stream was destroyed, and, you know, part of a pond. And so, is that something that EPA can, or is it something ODNR allow that to happen?
Well, the mineral extraction is under ODNR, and they have to get a mining permit. We all need the building materials, the sand and gravel and limestone and whatever. But also, it's back to what I was talking about earlier, prevention. There's certain areas where they're proposing mines that is basically gonna destroy groundwater influence to the surface water quality, wetlands, fins, so on, especially if they dry mine. If they're going to pump water out, they're gonna control, in certain areas, they're gonna control all that groundwater from getting in those streams, and those streams, if they continue to exist after the groundwater's been controlled, that would be a miracle. But at a minimum, they're going to impact those cold water habitats.
Well, within BW Greenway, we got, you know, tremendous aquifer, you know, and we got, all kinds of gravel, you know, outwash. So I don't know if, Anna, is there anything you could share with that?
Mining is, when it comes to industrial mining or, you know, your aggregate mining, a lot of them, those operations tend to fit under what's called the TOLIC rule, which is they can't consider, if they're just sitting on the edge of the bank of the stream and they're dredging, they're doing a one-step removal process. That's not a regulated activity under the Corps of Engineers. And unfortunately, Ohio EPA doesn't have like a separate regulatory permitting pathway for our streams. We rely on the Corps of Engineers permitting mechanisms for that. We have an isolated wetland program, but for waters of the United States, it all has to be permitted under the Corps' 404 authority. So if there's no permit trigger from the Corps' perspective, then there's no opportunity for us to review those impacts. You know, we've often said to those operations, like, okay, how are you gonna access, say, a wetland, like a giant wetland? They think that they're gonna be able to just sit on the side and dig it out, or that it's all forested, you know? How are you going to clear the forest to get to the resource below without causing excessive substrate disturbance? You're gonna have to put in some temporary access pads. Those are typically like permit triggers. So it's something that we're trying to tackle right now. It's a very challenging industry because the Corps will often issue this no permit required, because TOLIC means that they can't be pinged on fill activity for incidental fallback. So that means like when they put that substrate out, anything that's falling back from the bucket cannot be considered fill. So they kind of slide under the radar. We've caught a couple instances where the Corps has issued a no permit required letter because they tend to not ask the questions that we're asking, like where are your access roads gonna be going? You know, they just basically hear that they're going to be digging it out, and so they don't have authority on that because it has to be fill for the Corps. But then they've come around later on and said, no, wait a minute, we gave you a no permit required letter, but it looks like you've got fill going on here, and then they get them. So that's a little sneaky in our opinion. We like to be very transparent about what's required, we ask all the questions, and so this is something we're trying to do to prevent this, but it seems that a lot of these mining operations have learned to operate under this TOLIC rule, and, you know, they're just digging according to what they're telling the Corps. Now, when you get on site, you kind of see some different things, so we're trying to talk with those industries about this a little bit more.
And really, if it's not in-stream mining, it's an open, you know, they're proposing in an open land. They really, under DNR, there should be better siting criteria to see if they're going, even, okay, I'm doing it here, but I've got potential impact ground and surface water all around. That should be evaluated, and there should be some restrictions on that. And then the operations, you know, same kind of deal. We're proposing, you know, to de-water. Is that gonna have an impact? They may, you know, they're de-watering it so they can mine that particular area, but that de-watering operation may impact groundwater and surface water in a larger area. Or wetlands, fins, other structure, floodplains, definitely could have an impact.
Thank you.
I don't think we ever did answer bank stabilization, did we?
Did you get your question answered about the IV or the Vinca?
Oh,
Yeah, because I was thinking of where I live, it's very interesting because there's a continental divide. And so even though I live in Oakwood, if you go south, there's this divide, and that water then goes to the Beaver Creek, or maybe Little Beaver Creek. And yet the stream, the Rubicon Creek, flows north into the Great Miami. And so the what kinds of things that we're thinking about is that, you know, everything we do connects with, you know, all the other areas. And so when we talk to neighbors, you know, this is the kind of information that I like to have. But then you know, there's also kind of, I wonder if you're going to be talking about the relation to neighboring wetlands. The, you know, do you understand how there are a lot of wetland areas that have been drained in the area where I live. And so that impacts, everything. So that's what, that one thing about relation to neighboring wetlands, I wonder if somebody could address that.
I mean, like how draining wetlands can impact, and there was a really famous case of that just not too long ago, where, was it the Tackett case? Sackett.
Versus EPA.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Where essentially it was kind of getting at what I think you're describing, where, and I'm gonna butcher it, Anna did not do a much more eloquent job of describing what the issue was for those who don't know, but essentially there was a substantial wetland system that the landowner was going to impact, but the lawsuit came about because by impacting those wetlands, by filling them, by draining them, what have you, it was going to cause negative impacts downstream for, thousands of people and, kind of take away their livelihoods a little bit, their rights to clean water and all that. But, so yeah, it's certainly connected. A wetland in a watershed belongs to that entire watershed, not just that one tiny little area.
And when wetlands are drained, so water enters a wetland through a lot of ways, precipitation and runoff, and also there can be groundwater entering wetlands. If a wetland is drained, whoever's coming up with this idea to drain it has to figure out where's the water that would naturally flow into the wetland go. In often cases, the water ends up being diverted into a stream. And that can be related to our first topic of bank stabilization, because when you're increasing the runoff and increasing the flow rate at times when there's an increase in runoff entering the stream, it causes the banks to erode. You also get stream bed degradation and aggradation, where those increased flows of water entering the stream are not only eroding the banks, but degrading the bed of the stream as well. So that's one of the ways that draining a wetland can. And you would also have something similar happening if you're filling the wetland. Because similarly, the water has to go somewhere. And in that case, it would likely go to the nearest stream or body of other surface water, and you have similar problems.
The opposite of that, if you are a landowner and you have a property that is suitable for wetlands, Warren has designed and built several. So we would be a contact if you think you have an area that might be suitable to put one in. That's something that we do. We come out and look and make sure that it's suitable and give design advice
And that each county has a soil and water conservation district, so if some of you folks are from surrounding counties, by all means, reach out to your local soil and water district.
When you're talking about filling or drying a wetland area, does that, because the water is going somewhere else and not staying there, does that affect like the groundwater in that area, like the amount of groundwater that's available in that specific area, and then basically like move that downward?
It can. It definitely depends on what the surrounding ground cover is and the soil characteristics around you. So the water can still infiltrate nearby in the surrounding area, but say if you're compacting it for development, the water will not be able to infiltrate because the soil is compacted and it will run off like surface flow again into your nearest surface body of water. So it definitely can also cause problems with reduction in groundwater infiltration.
My name's Joshua Trapp. I'm from Clark County, Army Township area. We're currently dealing with a large-scale solar project that's being presented in our area. It's called the Sloopy Solar Energy Center. And there's been 3,200 acres leased with 1,600 acres possibly being covered in solar panels. And the developer's talking about removing the topsoil during the construction phase, which could last 2 to 3 years from my understanding. And we're very concerned about how this is going to affect the Little Miami River watershed. This project is being placed on the headwaters of that river. So our local community is worried about infiltration of our aquifers and runoff issues into our local ditches and streams, and how it can affect people downstream. So I came with 2 other team members to kind of raise awareness about this project, and to ask questions about what people down in this area might think about something like that and how it could affect Little Miami watershed.
Is that proposed in the upper part of the Little Miami, like South Charleston area?
Sir, yes. It's yes, if you were to like triangulate between, South Charleston, South End of London, and South Summerford Road, Plattsburgh Road, South Buena Vista Road,
Yeah.
State Route 54. Yes.
There's 2 county-maintained ditches that will be in this project if it goes through. One's the George Wilson ditch, which is the Lisbon Fork, and then, or becomes the Lisbon Fork. And then there's a Gilroy ditch, which is also county-maintained. And both of those are, and, we followed it, that both of those are the, headwater streams of the Little Miami. And they're, the George Wilson ditch starts on my property, and there's water that comes across the railroad tracks to even get there. And I would say, based off of your commentary before, it would be considered like a class 2, I guess, because there is water there mostly, but as things dry up, it just kind of stagnates, right? But it's always there. I've never really seen it bone dry, but it takes on a lot of surface runoff in heavy rain events. But if they strip the topsoil off,
Do you know why they're wanting to strip the topsoil?
They strip the topsoil off to get down to the impermeable layer so they can mount the supports for the solar arrays, and to make it flat so they can easily build roads. It's going to be highly disruptive to our community and area. So they're going to affect drainage tiles that have been there since the 1950s.
it's Kokomo soil for the most part, and some of that soil, like on my place, it's 4 or 5 feet thick. Well, the Kokomo soil, I'm sure you've all been aware of it, but if you use, web soil survey and you do all of that, it comes up with, the vast majority of this project is classified as prime farmland because of a lot of that Kokomo soil. Well, also, when you check box things and look into that web soil survey, it tells you whether it's conducive to anchor-based solar arrays. It's not, because of that soil. That soil won't hold those anchors, so they have to remove that, at least in the rows at minimum, where they're gonna put these, I-beam pylon things to hold their arrays. So they're gonna disrupt tile, they're
And
gonna
then they're
take
putting it
topsoil
back.
away.
Right?
Yes, and
That's
they're,
to be determined.
To be
and I
determined.
met with the company because obviously I'm with Little Miami Watershed Network, so I represent from Clark County to Cincinnati, so I don't have to play the county game. And I met with them just to ask them questions. They've had public hearings, and they are claiming that they will take that, install the high beams, that they don't need to remove this much soil, but, I'm just saying what they told me.
Well,
So, and they're saying they're gonna put the topsoil back, and then they will plant native plants that are no higher than 3 feet tall. Which doesn't leave you a lot of options, and also doesn't fend off those honeysuckle and those invasive plants that can tend to, we represent a lot of the native plants. We would try to help people put in native plants in their ditches, farmers, to do the same thing, and direct them to grants and how to do that. So I'm very aware of what kind of plants they can plant. I'm very aware of the arrays that are in Warren County. I have found out that my own hometown in Michigan has actually a 3,000 acre one done by this same company, and I'm going home this weekend, I'm gonna drive by because I didn't realize it was there, so I didn't really pay attention. But the problem is they're gonna disrupt that seed bed, so they're claiming that they will take 2 to 3 plantings to have the seed bed completely
reset, basically. So that's kind of that's where, you know, we have kind of, we're not taking a stance one way or the other because we're just kind of, we need to hear all of it, but it just keeps leaning like what they're saying, like it's going to disrupt that whole section. We have a board member that is studying sediment, effects on the streams. He goes to German towns, Chris, you know Chris? Okay, so, yeah, so he's interested in this too, and the crops have been cut, so we're gonna try to go out and look at the springs and see what that looks like with my board members who are doing all the things you guys do too. So, but yeah, that's still the big question is like, when they do that, cause they're claiming it won't, and that they're the most, friendly of all of the solar people, and that they don't have to have it completely flat, that they have designed a way that it makes it wavy and it still works. But if you go and look at the land out there, it's still really hilly. I mean, it's just like out here, it's not very far from here, so it's, you get it, like it's, to make it graded correctly, it just doesn't. Yeah, I'm just trying to, like, their understanding of it is, you know, where we're at too. So it's just kind of like, we can't understand how this wouldn't end up affecting Clifton, how it wouldn't affect Bath. Like, we just can't like wrap our heads around it because it doesn't, we hear so much contradictory stuff from everybody. So, not them, but, you know.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? I'm trying to be kind of like.
Sure. I've weighed in on a couple of these larger scale solar projects, mainly from a fencing perspective and how that affects wildlife movement, because that's a real big issue. And, you know, probably second to like that water quality issue you were mentioning.
We're worried about that too.
Oh, yeah. There's really, I mean, there are some wildlife friendly fencing solutions out there, but, you know, of course this is about headwater streams, but the ones that I have weighed in on have partnered with really great consulting firms, environmental consulting firms. And I'm not saying this is my opinion one way or the other, but, you know, and I've hired some of these consulting firms. I've worked with them multiple times, and they are really great integrity. And so there is some chances out there that it will be done like they say it will be done, because of, I have a lot of trust and faith in these consulting firms that we work with, Stantec, Davey.
They're working with SWCA.
Yeah, I've worked with them.
It's out of Cincinnati.
Yeah. So, didn't you work?
I review most solar projects, other power projects too, that come through the state, through coordination with the Ohio Power Siting Board.
I wonder.
Yeah, so I see most of these projects. I've not heard of that one yet. I'm wondering how new it is.
It has a case number.
It does, okay. So I'm expecting then that coordination email to come through anytime now. They've opened up their docket. All right, and I've not seen, like Grace said, I mean, the Power Siting Board also regulates them. And so if they say that they're gonna do these things, then they need to do them, and they will likely see through that they get that done. You know, and all of this coordination is also done with DNR, as well as throughout the entire Ohio EPA agency and other agencies as well. And DNR has their setback requirements, as well as their planting recommendations for native species, and then, you know, what might be suitable for solar farms, being that you can't have a lot of coverage, right? They have to have that access to the sun. But it sounds like they're doing what they should be doing from a regulatory standpoint, and I would say that, you know, I wouldn't worry all that much, that they should be putting the topsoil back and then planting hopefully some native seeds that are.
Well, I
But
guess our concern
what
is
happens
primarily
between
during-
the time that they remove the topsoil and the 2 to 3 years it takes them to put it back? Like, how can that adversely affect, cause that keeps being my question and my board's question, is like, okay, so you're gonna remove it, but what happens if we have a 2016 again? Cause 2016, I worked at Bellbrook Sugar Creek Park District on Little Miami. The fire trucks, the firemen actually had to sleep in my office because they could not get to Sugar Creek Township to get to people if there was an emergency for like a month. like 2016.
I'm not familiar with what
It was
happened in
wild.
2016.
I was,
I don't know what that
Are you talking about like a
is.
flood or a fire?
yeah, there was
happened
just
in-
so much
It's a really
rain
wet
that it was a very, very, very wet year.
Well, they
It's
will be
starting in,
required
like, February.
to implement like stormwater best management practices to help with, you know, any excessive
they're-
runoff, if that's what you're concerned about.
Last Tuesday, was it Tuesday or Wednesday, we had a tremendous amount of rain after this long dry spell, right? And a local farmer out there said at his farm on Summerford Road, which is on the headwaters, Little Miami, he received 3.66 inches of rain. So that Wilson's ditch that he mentioned was absolutely flooded. So if we receive that kind of rainfall during the construction phase of the solar project, that water, where will it go? And at what speed?
Yeah.
I don't think it would be a whole lot worse if, correct me if I'm wrong, anybody, but my opinion, if you have a freshly tilled farm field that's of the same acreage, that's got exposed soil, and you get that kind of rain, I think that would have a larger impact than what they're discussing doing with taking the topsoil off, leaving a lot of really hard compacted soil left. It's that soft tilled soil that would have even worse impacts.
I guess what I'm saying is if the rainwater hits an impermeable clay-based layer, it's like spilling your coffee on the coffee table. It's just gonna take the path of least resistance and then end up somewhere where it normally, naturally, in our area wouldn't end up. We're concerned about that, as well as if it is directed to the normal ditches that are already there, will they be overwhelmed and create damage downstream?
Yeah. It will percolate, it might take a while, but, the water will eventually percolate, but it's still gonna hit all that tile and rush out of there. And it probably will hit the tile quicker even, so that definitely could be an issue during the construction phase, but if they're talking about, replanting with native plants, and I know there's been a ton of research and thought put into putting native, herbaceous vegetation, in solar arrays, that's part of their benefit too, is reaping that ecological benefit of having pollinator habitat. It's gonna have the opposite of what your concerns are right now. It's gonna absorb and hold so much more water, that it will help mitigate some of these flooding issues.
Yeah, agrivoltaics is not part of this project thus far, so planting pollinators and things like that, I think, they're not even discussing that at this point.
But they're putting native, are you talking about I thought you said they were gonna put native plants
They haven't
underneath the
listed
panels?
plants they're willing to use yet, and they haven't released that information.
Yeah.
Yeah,
There'll be comments from DNR, I'm sure, about that.
Okay.
They have like a whole guidance document on recommendations, requirements of these solar facilities.
Do they have to put in retention, since they're putting in 1,600 acres of impermeable surface?
I would definitely think so. I mean, yeah, they have to be able to control a certain volume of water. Now, something like an extreme rain event like that, that's beyond the regulations, what the regulations can require. And that can happen anywhere, like in a residential area too, because the residential developments are only required to retain so much water quality volume. But that's frequently, especially with with global climate change, it's always going kind of over that regulated amount. But that's just what the authorities, have, so.
The impermeable surface issue is different because the solar panels are individual, 6 to 8 feet long, and the water runs off back to the ground in the same place. So it probably percolates slower because it's been concentrated from 6 feet into one place as opposed to hitting all the ground at once. But it's not like a parking lot or a street where you run it all into a storm sewer and take it all in a pipe to the creek in one place.
But
which is
Kokomo is a high-grade, poorly drained
construction
soil.
down my place did.
I mean, once it's full, without drainage, without tile, Kokomo is a wetland in nature. It's a hydric soil, it's very poorly drained. So if you go in and you destroy the tile system, and you don't put it back, so then you've got a soil that will not move water through it.
I hate to say this, but maybe it would be good to add a wetland back to Ohio, because we lost so many.
So,
Yeah,
soil and waters, we are non-regulatory. So unfortunately, we cannot help in any of that situation. The last time we had a solar group come into Greene County, your contact in Clark County is gonna be Chris Simpson. Okay, make sure you reach out to Chris. How we handled the last solar project as a conservation district. Because we know there's nothing we can do about it to encourage or stop it, and that's not what we do. What we tried to do when we thought we were getting one in our county was play nice on all sides so that we would be contacted by landowners, by the companies, by the agencies that do regulate, so that we can try to, you're absolutely right. There's gonna be problems when you start disturbing that amount of whatever. There will be runoff. There will be tile mains that are affected. There will be drainage ditches that are affected. What we did as a conservation district, our solar project did go away, but we were ready to go if it had happened, to make sure that they were willing to reach out to us to try to head off any problems that would have happened with the construction. That we would be on site to help talk to the landowners, talk to the neighbors, be that independent third party that could talk to all of the parties and try to come out with the best sort of situation that could happen when tensions are high. So that's what we were going to try to do if that happened here in Greene County. We were going to try to help as much with the known tile that we were aware of. We were going to try to talk to the landowners that we work with, reach out to the ones that we don't. If it affected one of our, because we do the ditch maintenance program for our county engineer, we were ready to deal with whatever happened with that and try to be as proactive as we could and try not to be reactive, by trying to play nice with both sides and be that third party for them, so that when problems arise, we weren't being as reactive as we had to be. We could try to be a little bit more proactive. That was the stance that we were going to take, but as I said, ours did go away.
Is that the Kingwood project?
Yes. Yeah, it would be Kingwood Solar, yeah.
I would just offer, I can give you my card and connect you with our stormwater program, because they comment on these things as well. They also have a guidance document for solar facilities and best management practices for the runoff that comes from the solar panels and what you should plant in front of them and to help with that. And then you can express your concerns and they'll have that conversation with you. And if they feel like you've got some valid concerns, then they'll make those comments during my coordination with the power signing board.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, they don't know that kind of on the ground, knowledge like you guys have.
Mm-hmm.
It's important.
Yep.
Tom, I'd like to ask a question about mitigation. Many years back, when Kroger was put in there on Dayton, Yellow Springs Road, I think it was over at that time, asked to have that stream filled, a pipe, replaced by a pipe, so that they could, they didn't stop the flow, they just, and I'm sure that happens other places. I know with the wetland we lost just, the last couple months, that was mitigated in Gracie's land bank. But it's not in our watershed, it's over on, the west side of Dayton. And so and then of course the question of what we did lose with the Smith's ditch that the gravel company. So is there such a thing as mitigation where you would, if you're gonna lose it here, you can restore it there? I don't know, I know with the wetlands, you have the category 1, 2, and 3, and you have to, pay so much at the bank and things like that, and some can't be done, but is there something like that for streams where?
I believe there is, because we got mitigation funding helped with the removal of the Lowhead Dam downstream of downtown Dayton. I always want to say the Tate Station, but yeah, I think it was the Tate Station Lowhead Dam. So I know mitigation funds were used because a stream was damaged in some other place. And I don't know what the project was. You can talk
I think
to
it was a
Sarah.
transportation project.
Yeah.
An ODOT
It was an
project.
ODOT project, yeah. So ODOT maybe perhaps damaged a stream somewhere and use the funds to remove Tate Station. You could talk to Sarah Hippensteel in our office. She could probably tell you how that worked.
So there is that mitigation formula, is that something that EPA?
Mitigation, well, we always try to encourage when we get to see projects and it's not just authorized under the core, you know, like, why can you not relocate the stream? That's always kind of our preference. We want you to relocate the stream, but then that's always kind of tied to some monitoring, because we want to make sure that the stream is stable, you know, that it achieves at least the same designated or existing use that it was when it was impacted. So generally that can require up to 10 years, because you want them to plant a nice riparian area and you want them to demonstrate that it's on a trajectory to being forested. So a lot of times, you know, entities don't want to do that anymore. They don't want to commit to that time and those resources and potentially not meeting performance criteria that they need to be released from their mitigation project. So they just go straight to the bank, because that is the number one option, honestly, in the hierarchy, since historically mitigation, permanently responsible is what we would call that stream relocation. Permanently responsible mitigation has been historically unsuccessful if just left up to the developer. So now you've got like these kind of large bankers that know how to do restoration the right way, and so that's kind of preferred because it's more guaranteed that you're going to get the results that you want from your mitigation projects. That's why they're kind of going outside of maybe the immediate area, but permanently responsible mitigation is the best way to keep it close if you can find a project or a property nearby that is willing to do the work. And frankly, like, service areas are expanding. You know, we get pressure all the time from our stakeholders that it needs to go from being required in the 8-digit HUC to the 6-digit HUC, which it just gets, you know, as you get lower on the HUCs, it just gets larger and larger and larger. And it used to be 12-digit HUC would be ideal, right? That's really nearby, that's right there. But now it's 8-digit HUC, and then sometimes the service areas of bankers will go to an adjacent 8-digit HUC, so it won't be a full 6-digit HUC, but it's a constant battle on hydrologic unit code. So it's like the different degrees of the watershed. So, you know, we've got 2 major watersheds in Ohio, one that drains to Lake Erie and one that drains to the Ohio River. So that might be, is that like HUC 2 or something?
More digits,
Yeah.
the smaller the watershed.
Yes. Yeah, so you narrow in on the watersheds.
I
Yeah.
don't know if any of you remember when we all worked together to do these 9-element watershed source water protection plans. Those were based on 12s.
Yeah.
So MCD and us, we did one up in this area, and then we created the Cedar Creek Collaborative, and we did all of the Little Miami watershed. So that was a lot of 12-digit HUCs to make that, you know, that whole area.
A 12-digit HUC, maybe 40 square miles, 50?
35 to 40, I think.
Something on that.
The Mad River was just delineated for the 9-element plan within the last 2 years, and it's, if you're at West Liberty, where Macachee Creek comes in, all the tributary, the main stem of the Mad and the tributaries going all the way up to just east of Bell Fountain, and it's about 35 to 40 mile area.
Bob, your question, you know, and so Anna said, if you can find an entity that will take these mitigations and maintain them, you know, and actually it has to be protected in perpetuity, like a park district, or maybe a land trust, or like Beaver Creek wetlands. Sometimes, so we've received a couple of permittee responsible mitigations in streams, where essentially we take their impacts and mitigate them at 5 Rivers by doing some enhancements to some existing streams, removing all the invasives and planting, you know, a lot of native plants, and it's done by a third party and it's monitored, you know, it's all paid for by someone else, but it greatly enhances, you know, the biodiversity and the integrity of an existing stream, you know, to kind of offset some of those impacts. So that's happened a couple of times at Metro Parks, and of course we will, those areas are already protected and maintained. So could sometimes be an option, if that's still an option, regulation-wise. Changes all the time, so.
Yeah, we like to see permanently responsible mitigation when it can be done well. We have a couple really good practitioners in Ohio that do really good work. So they generally get the permanently responsible mitigation plan approval more quickly, say, than just somebody that wants to quickly develop and they think that they're gonna be able to create a new stream or wetland without having any experience, right? And that's the way it used to be, and that's why we go to banks primarily now, because just, it was not successful. With the topic of mitigation, I did want to plant a plug during tonight's meeting, because it is primarily about headwater streams, right? We had rulemakings in 2024 where we passed Ohio's first stream rules. So it was very exciting for Ohio EPA, for the state to finally have stream rules. With that being said, there was this whole new tool that was introduced to evaluate functional assessments of streams. I don't want to get too technical, but during the rulemaking, there was a lot of stakeholder engagement, so much stakeholder engagement, and there ended up being so much so that we actually have now what's called a drainage area scaling factor, okay, that puts less priority on our headwater streams and more priority on our bigger systems. The argument has been from that group of stakeholders that managed to get this through that headwater streams actually act as a conduit to our larger streams, therefore causing more erosion because of all the forces, and that sediment is the main form of pollution in our rivers. And so by working on prioritizing kind of the larger streams and the bank erosion and the sediment deposition and deprioritizing the headwater streams and instead focusing on watershed storage, so things like, your residential detention basins, beaver dams are often brought up, but they want to focus, on the watershed storage aspect of things where the water can trickle out and there's less likely that force that drives the erosion downstream. So, there will be another rulemaking on this in a couple of years, and I'd say pay attention. So, pay attention to that. It was kind of a big ordeal. So we've got some, you guys can probably understand, we got some people that are pretty angry about that, but then some people that are pretty excited about it. Because it's easier for them to impact headwater streams. They can now, because of the scaling factor, essentially mitigate at less than 1-to-1. And then they get more mitigation credit for doing work on larger streams instead of the headwater streams. So keep that in mind when we do some rulemakings, because there's big advantages to being kind of involved in that process if you can understand it.
Good caveat.
Yeah, it is,
If
yeah.
you can understand
If you
it.
can understand it, it's challenging. It can be challenging.
Well, I have a stream that goes through my property. Those rules, should I be aware of those rules? Is that?
If you want to impact the stream, maybe. It just depends on what you would want to do. Right now, you can essentially impact any ephemeral stream that you want. You can impact up to a certain amount of stream bed without requiring mitigation under a nationwide permit. That's 300ths of an acre, which can equivalent up to 1,000 linear feet, more than 1,000 depending on the size of the width of the stream, without getting mitigation, having to do any mitigation. And they're trying to make that threshold go up.
There's some people misinterpreting that too. You correct me if I'm wrong, when state legislators did away with protection of ephemeral streams, they didn't make it clear in there that if you let's say you had a fin that had a groundwater discharge and so on, a lot of people think that they can, you know, and that, let's say that groundwater discharge is discharging all year to a main stem or a main stream. Some people took that change and think that they can interrupt that, which they can't without.
It's gotta be relatively permanent water. Okay, that's what the court's
Yes,
going off
right.
of now. If it's not relatively permanent water, then it's not regulated as a water of the US. And that's.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying, that
Yeah.
some people, because it's so small, and but it's still discharging groundwater year round, it's protected, but they think since it's so small, I can.
Yeah, oh, we get
I
that
can
tons of,
divert
all
it,
the time.
I
Mhm.
can cover it, you know, whatever I wanna do, and no,
People-
you can't.
Unqualified people like to make flow regime
Yeah,
calls.
yeah.
If it's small, then they think that it's fair game. But that's not how it works.
Right,
Tom, it's about time.
okay.
I wanna, first of all, you brought up detention pond. That may be another thing in the future. You know, because, you know, right when we lost our wetland, the detention pond is just this week, you know. But they have a lot of issues with that. First of all, let's thank our panel. When we had our potluck picnic, right when we were ready to eat a potluck, the storm came in. And so a lot of us left. And we were on all this wonderful ice cream from Young's Dairy. So let's say it's here. So make sure when you leave, have something like that, and also pass out the ballot for the next Chautauqua. And brochures and so forth over there, and our maps.
Did you
So
guys
please
know
hold
George
us up to that.
McConkey?
And
He
if
was
you haven't
there.
signed in, please do. We'd like to
George.
keep track.
George was married to a cousin
Connect
of
with.
mine.
So thank you all for
Passed away
coming.
some years
And
ago.
anybody else have anything on that before we break up? Okay. Thank you. I mean, that really helps. Thank you, Mike.
You're very welcome.
Well, kind of these discussions, you don't have
Get that farm bill passed.
So it gives you